It was a Wednesday evening, and the sky was overcast, heavy with the promise of rain. I sat by the window, watching the city streets below. People rushed by, cars honking, the world spinning as usual. Mark, my husband, had been working late a lot recently. Too late, if I thought about it, but I never had a reason to question him before. His job at the advertising firm often kept him busy. He had a knack for winning clients over, making them feel like they were getting more than just a marketing plan. He had charm, charisma, things I had fallen in love with. So, when the long hours began, I accepted them. It was normal, I told myself. That is what successful people do. But that night, as I sat in the living room, waiting for him to come home, there was a knot in my stomach I could not ignore. His messages had been short all day. In a meeting, "We'll be late tonight, don't wait up." He always sent quick texts, but today they felt colder, more distant. A few weeks ago, I would not have thought anything of it. I would have believed him without question. But then things had changed. It started with a scent. A faint, unfamiliar perfume on his jacket. It was subtle, so easy to miss. At first, I did not think much of it. I told myself it must have come from one of his colleagues, maybe from a lunch meeting. It could have been an accident. People brushed past each other all the time. It did not mean anything, but that perfume lingered. It was always there, and it wasn't mine. Then came the phone calls. He would step outside to take them, always glancing at his phone before leaving the room. Sometimes he would laugh, this low, soft laugh I hadn't heard in a long time. When I asked who it was, he would shrug. "Just work stuff," he would say. I never pressed him. I didn't want to be the suspicious wife. I didn't want to push him away with my insecurities. But that night, something was different. It was not just the perfume or the phone calls. It was how distant he had become, how he seemed to drift further away with each passing day. We used to talk about everything. We would stay up late, laughing about silly things, sharing our dreams and fears. But lately, those conversations had vanished. Instead, there was silence. And in that silence, my doubt grew. I stood up, walking over to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. The house felt too quiet. I glanced at the clock. 9:45 p.m. He should have been home by now. I debated calling him, but something held me back. I didn't want to seem paranoid. I didn't want to be that person. But as I stood there, sipping the water, a memory crept into my mind. 2 weeks ago, Mark had mentioned joining a new club at work. Some kind of social group. I remember thinking it was odd. He had never been the type to join clubs, especially ones that met after work. But he had seemed so excited about it, so eager to talk about the people he had met there. A few names came up more than once. Greg, Sarah, and someone named Natalie. Natalie. I never asked who she was. I figured she was just another colleague. Maybe a new account manager or a designer. But every time he spoke about the club, he would mention her. Her ideas, her sense of humor, her passion for the work. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. It was 10:30 when Mark finally came home. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch a movie, but my mind was racing. He walked in, looking tired, his tie loose around his neck. "Long day," he muttered, tossing his briefcase onto the floor. "Yeah, I bet," I said, keeping my tone light. He didn't respond, just headed straight for the shower. I watched him go, my eyes narrowing. Something was definitely wrong. And I wasn't sure I could ignore it anymore. Over the next few days, things got worse. Mark became more distant, more withdrawn. He would leave the house early, saying he had meetings, and come back late, always with the same tired excuses. The phone calls continued, and every time he stepped outside to take one, that knot in my stomach tightened. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to follow him. I know how that sounds. It felt wrong, and I hated myself for even considering it, but I needed to know. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, wondering if I was being paranoid or if something was truly happening behind my back. He left the house around 2 p.m., telling me he was meeting Greg for coffee to discuss some project. I nodded, acting like I believed him, but the moment he was out the door, I grabbed my coat and followed at a distance. He didn't go to the coffee shop. Instead, he drove across town, to a part of the city we rarely visited. I trailed behind, my heart pounding in my chest, each turn confirming my worst fears. He pulled into a quiet street and parked in front of a small, nondescript house. My stomach dropped. I watched as a woman opened the door. I couldn't see her clearly from where I was, but I could make out her silhouette. Slim, long hair, maybe dark. She smiled at him, and he smiled back. An easy, that familiar smile I hadn't seen in months. They disappeared inside, and I sat there, frozen. I felt sick. The world around me blurred, the cars passing by, the people walking their dogs, completely unaware of the storm that had just ripped through my life. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that house, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. The perfume, the phone calls, the distance, everything clicked into place. I drove home, numb, not sure what to do next. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more time, more proof, or maybe just the courage to face what I already knew. That night, Mark came home late again. He smelled of that perfume, the same one that haunted me for weeks. He sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had changed. As if we were still the same couple we had always been. I didn't say anything. I just watched him, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. There was no explosive fight, no dramatic confrontation, just silence. I still don't know what I will do. Part of me wants to scream, to demand answers, to make him admit what he has done. But another part of me is too tired, too broken to fight. Maybe it is easier to let it go, to pretend I don't know, to live in the lie for a little longer. Maybe I'm not ready for the truth. Or maybe deep down, I am just afraid of what comes next.